Hey everyone, today we're going to be reading The Big Tree, and this is written and illustrated by Bruce Hiscock. So if it's written and illustrated by him, it means he did what? He wrote the words and he drew the pictures. Way to go if you got that. Let's go ahead and read The Big Tree. Autumn had come again to the big tree. As the days grew shorter, the dark leaves changed to yellow and gold. For a while they clung to the branches, and the tree was dazzling and bright. Then one frosty morning, the leaves began to fall, down, down, down. They drifted onto the tin roof of the old farmhouse. Winter was on the way, and the leaves were no longer needed. Soon the big tree would shed them all. The big tree is a sugar maple. It stands high on a hill in northern New York State. By the last farmhouse on the dirt road, sugar maples are common trees there, but few ever grow to this size. A massive trunk of the old maple is found over 4 feet thick, and its branches rise 100 feet in the air. It is a giant tree now and still growing, but of course, it wasn't always so big. Long ago, around the time of the American Revolution, this tree began as a small seed. Most of the country was wilderness then, and an ancient forest covered the spot where the farmhouse now stands. Wolves prowled silently in those woods. Eagles glided overhead, and tall evergreens swayed in the wind, brushing their needles against the broad leaves in the hardwood trees. Some of those hardwoods were maples, and one fall they released thousands of winged seeds. The seeds whirled and spun as they fell. Some landed on the rocks and some landed on the brook. One seed, no different from the others, came down on a patch of good soil and was covered by falling leaves. The seed did not sprout, though, for sugar maple seeds must be chilled by the winter before they are ready to grow. Soon the cold days came, and a blanket of snow pressed the seed into the ground. In the spring, the sun warmed the earth. A slender white root pushed out of the seed. As the root grew into the damp soil, the tiny stem began lifting the seed from the ground. The seed split open, and a long pair of leaves unfolded. In a few days, the true maple leaf appeared, and the tree was on its way. The year was 1775. Oh my goodness, that is over 200 years ago. That's crazy. That was almost 300 years ago, actually. The same spring Paul Revere made his famous ride, the American colonists began fighting the British. It was the start of the Revolutionary War. The next summer, as the fighting continued, the Americans declared their independence from England on July 4th, 1776. The tree was just a year old. Later, a fierce battle was fought in the valley below the hill, but no war ever reached that old forest. The maple grew very slowly during this time, for huge trees sheltered the seedling, keeping the forest floor dark and shady. After 6 years, the tree was only as tall as a rabbit. Then one spring, when George Washington was president, a violent storm swept over the hill. It knocked down the old white pine, and for the first time, bright sunshine reached the little maple. The tree began to straighten and lift its leaves towards the light. The maple grew steadily after that. In the summers, it was much taller than the seedlings in the shade. Like all the green plants, the tree was using energy from the sun to make its own food. Trees make sugar, their basic food, by a process called photosynthesis. Can you say that? Photosynthesis. It's a big word. The sugar is produced by leaves which gather sunlight. During photosynthesis, the leaves combine water supplied by the roots with carbon dioxide gas from the air. Sugar is formed and oxygen. The gas that we and all other animals breathe is given off. This wonderfully complex process is carried out by chlorophyll, the substance that makes the leaves green. Some of the sugar produced is used right away as food for the growing tree, and some is stored. The rest is transformed by the chemistry of the tree into cellulose and tough fiber in wood, leaves, roots, and bark. And the tree makes all of it itself, even its strongest branches, starting with air, rainwater, and a few minerals. I bet you didn't know all of that science goes into just a tree getting food for itself. It's crazy, isn't it? In the early 1800s, when the tree was about 30 years old and the United States was spreading westward, loggers came into the ancient forest. With sharp axes, they cleared most of the hillside to make a farm. When they reached the place where the tree stood, the owner of the land said, "This is a good site for a house. Save that fine maple from my yard." So the tree and a few others were not cut down. Once in a while, a logger would pause in his work to count the rings on the stump of a tree. Trees grow bigger by adding a new ring of wood each year. By counting them, the logger could tell the age of the tree. Some stumps had over 300 rings. So if one ring is 1 year of the tree's life and it had 300 rings, how old was that tree? It's 300 years old, and you can see all the rings in that tree that the author included in that illustration. In the spring, as the little leaves emerged, carpenters began building the farmhouse. The work went slowly, for everything was done by hand. They finished the outside, nailing plain cedar shingles on the back and fancy pine clapboards on the front. Just when the trees were turning, as the green faded from the leaves of the big tree, the brilliant colors were hidden all summer came shining through. That was a tongue twister. When the house was done, the leaves lay on the ground like an old brown carpet. Eventually they would rot, returning to their minerals and adding compost to the mountain soil. 40 years passed. The nation expanded to 28 states, while the big tree grew taller and thicker and added new limbs. Underground, it grew a strong set of roots as well. The roots near the tree trunk held the tree firm against the wind, while the smaller roots spread as wide as the branches to collect water and minerals from the soil. Trees need enormous amounts of water. Inside a tree, water carries minerals up to the leaves and sugar back down to the roots and other parts of the plant. These watery mixtures are sap, the lifeblood of trees. Sap travels through a network of tiny tubes, somewhat like our own blood system. But the tree has water in the sap, has no pumping heart to move the sap around. Instead, the water in the sap evaporates from each leaf and twig. As this moisture is lost, more water is drawn up from the roots to replace it. On a sunny day, gallons of sap water are lifted up to the trees as the sap circulates through the tree. So a gallon is like if you have a big gallon of milk at home, like a big jug of milk, and there's multiple gallons. Imagine all of that sap running through the tree. That's crazy. For many years, the farmer collected sap from his maple trees to make syrup and maple sugar. By 1865, the big tree had become an excellent producer, but the farmer had grown old. Now his grandchildren, back from the Civil War, did the sugaring. In March, when the first thaw came, they tapped the trees by drilling holes in each trunk. The holes were not deep, for the sap flows in the sapwood just under the bark. A spout called a spile was hammered firmly into the hole and the bucket attached. On a warm day, the sap ran with a steady drip, drip, drip while the chickadees sang their spring song. When the buckets were full, the sap was poured into an iron kettle and boiled down. It takes about 40 gallons of slightly sweet sap to make a gallon of syrup. So to have that sap, you need 40, so imagine 40 milk jugs to just make 1 gallon, so 1 milk jug of syrup. That's crazy that all that sap is condensed into 1 tiny little gallon of syrup. Sometimes a bit of syrup was boiled longer and then poured over the snow to make a sweet, chewy candy. The sugar that sweetened the sap has been stored all winter as starch in the roots of the trunk of the tree. Now the spring was near, the sap flowed through every branch to awaken the tightly closed buds. After a few weeks, the buds began to swell. That's when the sap turns bitter and the sugaring season is over. By early May, the tree was filled with small maple flowers. The flowers produced pollen, and the pollen floated on the breeze to other maple blossoms. Later, many of those flowers would develop into maple seeds. The leaves opened next, stretching out their tender young branches, making the tree a little bit taller. You can see those leaves going through all of the different phases that we just read about. The tree grew into the 20th century. There were 48 states in the Union now, and automobiles began chugging up the hill. So are we still in present day? They said there's 48 states right now. How many states are there present day today? There's 50. So are we in the past, the present, or the future at this point in our story? We're in the past. We're still a long time ago because we have 50 states now, not 48. The farmhouse was over 100 years old, and its age was showing. The maple was old too, but solid and healthy. It had neither been struck by lightning nor lost a branch to the wind, and so the bark had never been badly injured. Bugs often chewed on the leaves, but the covering bark protected the wood from insects and rot. Oh my goodness, this is such a beautiful picture. I'm going to show it to you before I read this page. Then, in the fall of 1987, an early snowstorm hit the hill. Heavy, wet flakes clung to the leaves, bending the branches until they could stand no more. Snap, thump, a large limb crashed down on the yard. Then whoomp, another fell, and another after that. The snow continued all day. The sound of breaking trees was like a rifle fire in the woods. It will take many years for the maple to recover from that storm. For a time, some of the inner wood, the heartwood, which is no longer alive, will be exposed to the air, but gradually new bark is covering the scars. The tree was damaged, but it survived. As the tree aged, life on the hill has changed. Too, no one farms on the rocky lands anymore. Most of the cleared fields have grown back into forest. Even the road was moved, so now the tree stands in the backyard. But the house has been fixed up again. It has electricity, indoor plumbing, and a VCR. So, this book is a little bit old because I'm sure you have no idea what a VCR is. That's something that Miss Oss had when she was a little girl. So, a VCR was how you watched movies before we had our laptops or our iPads. You had to put them in the TV. So, this book's a little bit old, but it's still good. Now, every 4th of July, neighbors and friends gather under the big tree for a picnic to celebrate the birthday of America. Over 200 years have passed since the Revolution, and this maple has weathered them all. The tree is very old now, but still strong and growing. With a bit of luck and clean air and water, it will go on shading picnics for many years to come. I hope you enjoyed The Big Tree. Let me know what your favorite fact that you learned. This book was so full of so many interesting science facts about trees and nature. So let me know when we get back to school what your favorite tree fact we learned about was. I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.